Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining me today just to spend some time talking about one of my favourite subjects, which is positive workplace culture. So I don't for 1 minute think that this is something new and I'm about to share something fabulous with you, but I think that spending some time in this space would be worthwhile. So particularly over the last couple of years that we've had. So as we're approaching what might look like workplace normal from 2022, I think that it's worth spending some time just recapping and rethinking our strategies around workplace culture. So the pace of change over time has been phenomenal, as I said, especially over the last couple of years. Workplaces have had to pivot in ways that you never thought you'd have to do over this last journey. Our work is central to the people in our workplace. It's central to everything we do. And given that our work is central to that, the levels of trust and respect we have certainly impacts our culture. And no doubt we've had our challenges over the last 2 years, but as we emerge from the tunnel of what was COVID, I think there's much to be proud of. So this session's really a reminder or a recap of what existing support structures already exist in your workplaces, those being policies and procedures, the values of your organisation, your people management strategies, the external supports you have for staff by way of EAP. All of these feed into the culture of the organisation. So what is workplace culture? Well, it's the environment that we create for our employees. It plays a powerful role in determining their work satisfaction, their relationships, and how they progress within the organisation. It's also a mix of your organisation's leadership, values, the traditions, beliefs, and interactions and behaviours that all contribute to the emotional environment of your workplace. It also builds the attitudes of our staff as well. So in a workplace where the culture is sound, I think attitudes change in a positive way. I think in a workplace where the culture is sound, people have a lot more trust in each other. So some might say that they're the unspoken and unwritten rules that help form the solid relationships. And I guess the culture is about unspoken and unwritten rules, which can actually work to our detriment sometimes. So particularly in change, where people want to hold on to old ways of doing things. So there's nothing written about the ways things used to be, but we tend to fall back to these unwritten and unspoken rules. So I think developing a culture that's more transparent, that's there for people to see, is critically important. So what impacts the workplace culture? So culture in the workplace is impacted by a multitude of factors, and they play a role in developing workplace culture, including leadership, workplace practices and policies, the philosophies, and the people and work environment around us. So it's about shared understanding of the organisation's mission, the values that guide our decision-making and our activities, the focus and the management of senior leaders. I think leadership is critical to workplace culture, 100%. And I think whilst our CEOs and boards are critically important, I think, much of that load falls to our line managers. And I think it's critical that line managers, in working through the culture, are doing that in a way that's systematic across the business as well. So lots of people have different leadership styles, but I think ensuring that the way you manage people through your policies and procedures is the way that your colleague in another department would manage the same situation in the same circumstance. So not creating nuance leadership styles in different areas of the business. And a way to sort of combat that is to have, and you probably already do, but having leadership meetings and actually discussing some of the challenges that you each are working through in your teams, and work through outcomes together, because that way everyone's singing from the same songbook in terms of what is the message that we need our staff to hear. So how employees think about their relationship with others is important too. And I guess also that sits with leadership as well. You know, how you manage the dynamic of your team, how you manage the interactions of staff, and what attempts you make at bringing teams together can be critical in that space as well. How the organisation conducts its day-to-day business. Now, that can be from the minute someone walks through the open door of your business, assuming that we all end up back in a workplace, of course, but what people see when they walk into a foyer, how people feel when they walk into your organisation, how the people within the organisation make those people feel in that first instance. I remember doing some training recently before COVID for an organisation that dealt with, its client base was quite vast, and it would have required a whole lot of people from different cultures visiting this business. And when I walked through the front door of the business, there was a big sign there that said, you know, please take a number, and when you're called, you come to the window. When you finally got called and come to the window, there were another 4 signs scattered around the window about how we should speak to each other and what we can do. And then back out into the waiting room, there was a little playpen for children to play in, and another sign saying the toys must stay in the playpen and children are not to lay on the bed. So I was thinking to myself, by the time I read all the signage around the place, I had developed an attitude, and I was visiting, that I didn't actually feel that it was necessarily friendly or welcoming to me, but I wasn't a client. So, you know, I was only interacting with the staff in a different way. But I was actually at that workplace to do some work on workplace culture, and was able to explain to the teams there how that made me feel. So how people feel when they interact on a day-to-day business is really critical to the culture of your organisation. So the sum of all these factors is a distinctive organisational personality. So if everyone has the shared values of the organisation's mission, if we all guide our decision making so that everyone hears the same message, focusing our management and leadership styles on people and getting the best out of them, and ensuring that how we contribute to people within our business, building relationships is going to be critical to that. So, and also how, you know, we interact with members of the public, with our clients, with the families of our clients as well. So I think the organisational culture, whilst we're building a culture for our teams, the culture is something that everybody feels, whether you work in the organisation, you visit the organisation, you're accessing services from the organisation, all impact into what the culture is. So it's the environment we create, as I say, not only for our employees, but for everybody that enters our workplace at any juncture of their time with us. So, you know, being mindful of that and putting ourselves in the shoes of clients when we're entering into our business. And yeah, if something doesn't look right, making some suggestions about that, because I think it's critical. So the benefits of a positive workplace culture grow exponentially over time and produce continued results, positive emotions, positive energy, and it's all contagious. So if the workplace is negative, then the way we work tends to be negative. The way we communicate tends to be negative as well. So just to tap back into leadership, and I speak about leaders a lot because I think they are so critical to the workplace culture. When leadership is focused on building a kinder, more encouraging and engaged environment, it increases positive emotions and better health for the people that work with our organisations. People's relationships improve, and that fosters more collaboration and more spirit in the business. So the success and failure of our business really sits with each and every one of us, and we all contribute to the culture in either a positive or a negative way every single day in the organisation. So sometimes just checking how we're feeling before we step foot into the business can be critical to how we're seen by our colleagues and workplace friends within the organisation. So ways that can assist in these areas is investing in face-to-face interaction. So if we're talking about organisational culture and the environment that surrounds us at work, and it does, we all know this, it impacts our enjoyment of work, it impacts our relationships, and it can impact our processes, the way we work and how we work with each other. So investing in this face-to-face interaction is critical. Although technology has enabled us really to chat and be anywhere as we're doing today, you can't put a price really on face-to-face interactions. So considering thoughtful ways that encourage more face-to-face can be really critical, particularly as we move into 2022, which hopefully is a bit more normal. So I think trying to get back to relationships with our clients and our teams, especially those located remotely, in a face-to-face interaction is going to be important. But basically, it's not enough to say you want a positive culture. We all have to live that, each and every one of us, from top down. So establishing patterns of behaviour that build culture and positivity, inclusiveness and belonging. So I guess placing human relationships at the centre of the workplace takes a concerted and proactive effort on the part of leadership, on the part of all of us really. But I think leaders, people are hopefully following. We say about leaders that you're only a leader if people follow. So I'd like to think that as leaders in any business, leaders of your own team, leaders of your client teams as well, people do look at you and emulate that behaviour, emulate the way in which you're interacting. So, I think it's really important that sometimes we just check ourselves in terms of how we're interacting within our workplaces. So the short answer, if we talk about what impacts our culture, the short answer is everything. A multitude of factors play a role in developing our workplace culture, including leadership. Again, as I say, it's one of the things that I place an important amount of store on. The biggest mistake organisations make is letting their workplace culture form naturally without first defining what you want that culture to be. Leaderships are critical, our leadership teams, in emulating that culture for us as well. So as I say, be who you are and be authentic in what you do will hopefully mean that the people you lead will also be authentic in their workplace relationships as well. So half measures are no longer an option. Relationships in the workplace must move from the edges of business strategy and culture to the forefront of everything we do. So for the leaders listening, that kind of sits primarily with you, and then you're able to help, shift that culture down through the structures on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's so critical. The workplace practices of an organisation, how we work with each other, how we work with our clients is also critical, and also providing a space for people to discuss those workplace practices in a way where people are not feeling that they can't speak up is a critical space as well. Our policies and philosophies are critical in a workplace culture. our policies really provide the framework for everything we do. And so wherever someone is not sure about any aspect of the business, any aspect of process, the policy should guide them in the first instance, so that they've built themselves a framework for themselves of what's right, what's not quite right in the business, and where they can go for assistance should they need to. So I think that we need to make sure that our policies feature strongly. Our people are critical to our culture, and you don't need me to say that. But as I say, if we all come every day, we contribute to that culture either in a good way or a bad way. So, if we've not, had a good weekend and we come to work still, grumpy about that, and managing people or interacting with people in our teams, it can have a negative impact. So I think being able to check ourselves at the door is actually a good process as well, just in terms of, how am I feeling? What do I need to do to make myself feel better, so that we're not impacting the people that we work with. And the work environment. So I spoke before about the environment of a member that I work with, but I think that's critical as well. What's the environment like? How do people move around that environment? How do they find the things they need? Do they have everything they need? Is also critical. And I think that the number one critical impact in organisations is communication, because how we communicate with each other on a day-to-day basis is absolutely critical to the success of our workplace culture. So thinking about all of these things, leadership, workplace practices, our policies, our people, our work environment, our communications, getting that right, if we can, is going to be such a feature in developing a culture that's exactly the way that we want our business to look and feel. Because unfortunately, if it doesn't feel right, it can feel sometimes like this. And we know that, I think we do get a general sense of when things are not right in a business, when morale's down perhaps, or people are not working the way they used to. There's a fair chance that things are not quite right within the culture of the organisation. And how do we actually get in there and work through that? Sometimes bringing people together to work through culture, revisit the culture, can be critical to that space as well. So we generally know when trouble's coming in this space because, as I said before, we have morale that deteriorates, where people are not necessarily feeling as happy and engaged or even challenged as they used to. We have declines in productivity. We sense passive resistance. And I guess the real negative side to passive resistance is where that tends to escalate throughout the business and in and around the organisation, where our attrition rate is high. So people are starting to move away from the business, looking for alternative employment, not being happy in the business. Sometimes our projects are going over budget and past their deadlines, and employees can usually find reasons to avoid new ways of doing things and reverting back to the old way of doing things. So I think the workplace culture, as we move forward, really should move people with us, like a line in the sand. Here we all are together moving forward, and we move forward with a positive culture. What happens is that sometimes people can revert back to the way things were pre the new leader in the team, or pre the new CEO, or pre the new culture, the new policies that we've got. So if the communication around all of those things and from those leaders of our business is not sound, sometimes our teams will revert back. So it's critical to have your eyes wide open for that. Also, where divides can be created in the organisation, the them and us mentality. And I kind of alluded to this before about leadership making sure that how you apply the policies across the organisation, that each and every leader in the organisation does that uniformly across the business. So I've been into some workplaces where, a leader might apply the absence management policy one way, and then a leader in another department manages that in a different way, maybe a bit more flexible than manager A. Manager B doesn't really go to all the dots and crosses, but really has a bit more of a relaxed approach to that. That's fine for the manager. But what actually happens is that at some point, the staff from both of those teams will get together and then they discuss, as we all do, I've had my leave approved. Oh, really? I didn't have mine approved. I had to do X, Y, and Z. How did that happen? So I think making sure that how we work through our policies is critical to make sure that we don't accidentally build an us and them culture within our culture. So that transparency and openness is critical. And the organisation building a history of failed and painful changes. So, some organisations say to me, I feel like we're going through change a lot, or this is the third time in as many years. And the discussions that we have around that is possibly the change that you thought you had done was not embraced in a way that you were hoping. So as it said earlier in an earlier dot point, people reverting back to the things that they're more comfortable with. So I think culture really starts, people say it starts at the top. I say it starts all over the business, bottom up, down and across the business. So everybody should be really clipped onto that culture and actually involved in that culture. So, if you're having meetings around the culture, making sure that everyone has opportunity to contribute to those meetings. So you need to consider your part-time people, make sure that you have meetings at a time where everyone can be available, or if not, you're doing minutes for those meetings so that the communication flow applies to everybody in the business, and people are not just accidentally finding out information about the culture just by default. So I think we really need to focus some attention on that as well. So promoting a positive workplace culture. So being in it to win it really, for me, is a dedication to the cause. It should be a personal motivator as well as a broad cultural trait in a positive workplace. What gets people out of bed in the morning are important things to embrace as a fundamental part of workplace culture. So everyone being clipped in to the reason that we're all doing what we do in that business, in it to win it, we're all on the same team. So think about that if you're, on the threshold of doing more work on your culture. As we come back into what is normal, hopefully next year, and you might revisit aspects of your culture, just remember some of these things. Again, leading by example, and I don't mean to harp on about leadership, but it really is a critically important part of workplace culture. So if you're going to promote positive change in your organisation, you need to be able to demonstrate and model those changes as a surefire path to getting everyone on board. And really, the number one way to do that is leading by example. So just be mindful of that for those who are in leadership roles. And sticking with leadership, uncovering leadership blind spots. There are times when a leader is unaware of how their behaviour can have a negative influence. So for me, they're missed opportunities to demonstrate behaviours that engage employees and motivate employees. So being aware of your behaviour, being aware of how you're leading is really critical to avoiding negative influences in the organisation. And, as I say, they're perfectly missed opportunities for you to stand yourself up and be seen to be the leader that people are looking for. So the other important one is trust, and I spoke about that before, but building trust is really simply put, being open and honest in your communication and what drives your culture. And trust is one of the building blocks of both personal and professional relationships. So in terms of, I had a conversation with a colleague before today, nothing about the work we're talking about, but we were talking about trust. And I did say to somebody that for me, trust sits number one on my professional list of values, but it's also number one on my personal list of values. So for me, if someone breaches that trust, then they've probably lost me as a colleague, as a supporter of them, because it's very hard to come back from a breach of trust. Now that applies to everybody in our teams as well, but I think for leaders to be able to demonstrate trust, for trust to be seen by people that work for you, for trust to be at play in everything all of your teams do. So it's about building trust in your whole team as well, is critically important. So creating a psychologically safe environment is critically important as well. So taking a moment to assess your team's psychological safety. For instance, if you make a mistake in the workplace, psychological safety is a shared belief that it is safe to take interpersonal risks in a group. But for leaders, it's important to show respect for the other person's opinion as well. So it should be safe for us all to make mistakes, safe for us to own up to mistakes, safe for us to say that we need help. Because the opposite of all of that is that we're creating those blind spots. So people are not going to be forthcoming in things that have not quite gone right for them, where they don't feel safe to have an opinion or voice their opinion. So how you manage your meetings is critical to that as well, in increasing the team's effectiveness. Never saying to someone that you're wrong. This is not just leaders to teams, but with each other. Everyone's entitled to an opinion, and my opinion might not be aligned with what's right or wrong. It's still my opinion, but how I have a conversation with someone about that as a leader is, important in us being able to understand each other. And it's an opportunity and an appreciation to build unique contributions and letting the other person have their say and be comfortable around having that say as well. Developing resilience across the business. So your business is only as resilient as the people within that business. So I guess essentially, if the business struggles to adapt and bounce back, particularly from adversity, and we all have adversity and change, if we have trouble bouncing back from those moments in time, the business will probably struggle to bounce back quickly too. So it's about how resilient we are and how resilient the business is. And I think that's why it's important to develop organizational-wide resilient strategies. How can we offer supports to people around resilience? We've got, what do we have in place? Do we have coaching and mentoring? Do we have our EAP programs where people can discuss the things that are not working well for them? Do we have open door policies within our organisation where people can seek out that assistance and support when they need it? So resilience to me is like a tree that's bending over in the wind, and being resilient is bending but not breaking. So having the support systems that sit around the organisation to help people and the business bounce back from adversity really says something about the resiliency of your organisation and the effectiveness of the strategies that you have in place. So these are all critical things to think about as you're revisiting your culture and maybe the way forward as we approach 2022. So what about PPE? And no, I'm not talking about personal protective equipment. post-pandemic environment is what I'm talking about here. So being able to celebrate the return to the office. So with the wide availability now of vaccines across the country in various states, workplaces are already starting to return to their offices. And over the next few weeks or months, there'll be more of that. Some employees might be excited, and I guess other employees might be a little bit nervous about coming back, and that's understandable. Some people have been away from the workplace for more than 18 months. So for managers, checking in with their direct reports in order to keep a pulse on how they're feeling is going to be critical. And I think some actionable tips: celebrating a return to the office. So this may require some adjustment in the early days. So organising some fun things, welcome back lunches, happy hours at the end of the day, ways of keeping people connected, and more of face-to-face. As I said earlier in this session, making face-to-face the new normal or the new old normal again. So, I know for one that I'll be very happy to have more face-to-face meetings with people, visiting people's workplaces than over Zoom. So I think there's a lot of reasons that people will feel or potentially feel a little bit anxious. Developing new office policies. So any new policies that have come out of COVID, and there would be a few, should be communicated in a way that makes sure that everyone's across any new policies or guidelines that the organisation is taking post-COVID, like social distancing, if you're doing that in your workplaces, what the safety policies and protocols might be in the workplace, remote hybrid workplaces, what that looks like, what your office culture looks like, because many of us, as I said before, we haven't worked in the office for a long time. So, getting back to basics on what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in workplaces, because we need to just make sure that we're all on track. And also communicate and be open to feedback. So it's pretty, easy when we've been away for a long time that we've fallen into these, ways of, it's just been me in the office for 18 months. But the reality is that we need to get back to communicating, having open feedback, making safe spaces for those feedback sessions to happen. And remember that certain parts of the business may not, people may not have seen each other for a long time. So, the first day back is going to be an opportunity to set some new rules and precedents for the team. And it can serve as an introduction, a reintroduction to your culture as well. So not making the mistake of, being keen to get organised, to get back, and assuming that our culture is still intact after 18 months, but developing some strategies about making sure that our culture is aligned to our people, is aligned to our work, is aligned to our clients. So a reintroduction of the workplace culture and the important elements might be required. And be prepared to set new precedents as well. And we may have to in this new environment, but the communication around that is going to be so important. So just getting back to that first point, I think it's going to be critical how we return to the office, how we return to the new normal will be critical to our culture. And not assuming that everything in the culture is the way it was. So you may want to think about some strategies about how you elevate the policies, how you elevate the other frameworks in the business, how you elevate opportunities for people to spend time with each other in this post-pandemic environment are going to be critical. So if you didn't realise, for me, the two big ticket items are leaders and leadership. So the way leaders interact with the staff, with their employees, and what they communicate and their vision for the future is absolutely critical. Leaders need to promote individual engagement by building strong relationships and leveraging strengths, encouraging relationships of others, encouraging the development of new relationships, and discovering everyone's motivators. Leaders should not only be heard, but they should be seen as well. So just be mindful that our new normal will require really critical leadership. Communication in the workplace, again, is my number 2 ticket item, or equal number 1. So internal communication impacts the employee's ability to work. It impacts their feelings about their work. It impacts their work relationships. So in other words, your business communication methods influence your workplace culture and vice versa. So when you communicate effectively, your culture will become stronger. Communication is the basis of all relationships. So I found a quote here from Lois Garcelle about leadership that says, great leaders is about human experiences. It's not a formula or a program. It's a human activity that comes from the heart and considers the heart of others. It's an attitude, not a routine. And for communication, Barack Obama said, it's important to make sure that we're talking with each other in a way that heals and not in a way that wounds. And I think that's something that our culture should be really mindful of. This is not just a leadership problem. This is everyone's problem. How we communicate, the kindness we show to each other, the care we show to each other, the support that we show to each other is about building that kindness. It's about building a framework, the first rung of the ladder in ideal communication in our workplace. So something to think about is customers will never love your business until your employees love it first. And I think that's critical. We need to really embrace our culture, embrace our people, our clients, our communication, everything we do, everything we want for the business, we want and need for our staff as well. Everything we want for our business, we need and want for our clients as well. So connecting, making all the connections, understanding that the piece of work that you've got in front of you, where did that come from? Who's had input into that work before you've got it? Being mindful that someone else has contributed to that. And where is that piece of work going when you're finished? You know, how do you pass that work on in an authentic, kind work, not just flicking things on the email or, you know, not communicating. So just thinking about how we're re-entering this workforce post-pandemic to build cultures that are kind and nurturing, that for the business means that we develop and gain so much more from our people than we've ever done before, because we're opening up the communication lines. And I think that's absolutely critical. So Britt, I'm actually happy to take some questions, but I feel like we're near the end. So if anyone has some questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thanks, Margaret. There's no questions there yet, so we might just wait 30 seconds or so to see if any come through.
Okay, all right. Well, on that point, if I can help anybody, if anyone would like to talk about culture, if anyone would like to have some assistance around some of the, or understand some of the work that I've done with some organisations, please give me a call. You'll see on this final slide here a little bit about Jobs Australia. So please take the time to have a look at our bespoke services. Please take the time that if you want to ring up and have a chat about some element of your workplace, please feel free to do so. We are here to help you. So I would like to take this opportunity of thanking you all so much for taking the time today. And I guess, given that it's our last webinar of the year, wish everyone a very happy, healthy and safe new year, and look forward to working with you all again in 2022. Thank you so much.